What would you do if the person you trusted most in the world decided to kick you when you were at your absolute lowest? When the text came through, I was standing over my father's fresh grave. She wasn't just leaving me, she was erasing me. What's up, everyone, and welcome to the channel. Before we dive into one of the most brutal, calculated stories of betrayal I've ever lived through, do me a solid. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you loved, hit that like button. It lets me know I'm not alone. And comment down below with the one thing you'd never forgive. Stick around, because what happened next, well, let's just say she had no idea who she was really dealing with. The first shovelful of earth hit the polished oak of my father's casket with a sound I will never forget. It wasn't a thud. It was a finality, a hollow, wet, heart-splitting finality. The late November rain was a freezing mist seeping through the shoulders of my one good suit, the one he'd helped me pick out for my first investor meeting. I stood there, my mother trembling under my arm, a widow at 58, as the man who had built our world from nothing was returned to the clay. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a jarring, vulgar intrusion. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again, a frantic, persistent tremor against my thigh. Finally, as the minister offered his last condolences, I fished it out, thinking it was the funeral director or my uncle about the wake.
The screen glowed with her name, Chloe. Not a call, a string of texts. My heart, already shattered, did a bizarre little flip. Maybe she was checking in. Maybe she was saying she was on her way, that she was sorry she'd missed it, that she loved me. We'd had a fight before I had left, a stupid, heated argument about the future, but this was my father. She'd loved him too. I tapped the screen. The messages loaded. Chloe. Liam, we need to talk. Chloe. This isn't working. I can't do this anymore. Chloe, I've packed my things. I'm not coming back. Chloe, I've taken my half of the savings. I deserve that much. Consider it compensation for the time I've wasted. Chloe, don't try to find me. It's over. The world didn't just tilt, it inverted. The gray sky, the green astroturf, the somber faces of mourners, it all receded into a tunnel, at the end of which was the blinding, cruel light of my phone screen. Compensation? Wasted time? My father was in the ground. My future was lying in ruins around me, and she was sending me a breakup text, itemizing a financial settlement while the dirt was still fresh? A sound escaped me, something between a gasp and a choke. My mother looked up, her eyes red raw. Liam, honey, what is it? I couldn't tell her. I couldn't form the words. How do you say, the other pillar of my life just atomized itself via SMS? I just shook my head, swallowing a ball of acid and grief, and shoved the phone back into my pocket. Nothing, Mom. Just work. It's nothing. But it was everything. The house we shared. My house. A beautiful brownstone in Boston's South End that my father had helped me secure a loan for was a crime scene. Not of violence, but of absence. It felt colder, emptier than it ever had. She hadn't just taken her things. She had taken our things. The art we'd chosen together at a flea market in Cambridge, the ridiculously expensive coffee maker we'd saved for, the photo of us on the Cape, laughing in the sun, was gone from the silver frame on the mantel, leaving behind a faint, rectangular ghost in the dust. I walked through the rooms like a ghost myself, numb. The grief from my father was a heavy, leaden weight in my chest. This new wound, the betrayal from Chloe, was a sharp, surgical slice, precise and cold. I went to my home office, a small room overlooking the back garden. My father's old oak desk was there. I needed something familiar, something solid. I pulled open the top drawer where I kept important documents, my passport, my birth certificate, the deed to the house. It was gone. A jolt of pure adrenaline, the first feeling other than numbness I'd had in hours, shot through me. I yanked the drawer completely out, dumping its contents on the desk, receipts, paper clips, old keys. No deed. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, panicked drumbeat. I lunged for the small fireproof safe bolted to the floor in the closet. It contained the only thing of my father's I had left that mattered, his vintage Patek Philippe watch, a family heirloom he'd given me on his last birthday, and a stack of war bonds from my grandfather that were more sentimental than valuable. I spun the dial, my fingers slipping on the wet metal. It opened with a click. The watch was there, gleaming dully. The bonds were there, and on top of them, a single, crisp white envelope with my name on it, in Chloe's perfect, looping handwriting. My hands were shaking as I tore it open.
Liam, it began. No dear, no love. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know this seems cruel. The savings account is closed. I've also taken the deed to the house to have it appraised for my half of the equity. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. Please don't make this ugly. It's better this way. C. Appraised for her half? The deed was in my name. My father had co-signed the loan, but only my name was on the title. It was a point of pride for him, a gift. It's yours, son. Build your life in it. A cold, clarifying fury began to burn through the grief. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the heat of an argument. This was a plan. She'd waited. She'd waited for me to be at my most vulnerable, completely distracted by loss, and she'd made her move. I fell into my father's leather chair, the letter crumpled in my fist. The numbness was gone, replaced by a hyper-aware, icy focus. I looked around the office, at the empty spaces where her presence had been scrubbed away. She thought I was broken. She thought I was a mess of grief, easy to roll over. She had no idea. My father hadn't just taught me how to build a business. He'd taught me how to spot a weak point in a deal, how to anticipate a competitor's move. He'd taught me to think 3 steps ahead. And right now, my every instinct, every lesson he'd ever drilled into me was screaming that Chloe was only step 1 of someone else's plan. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't call her, begging or raging. That's what she expected. That's what would have given her the upper hand. Instead, I got to work. First, I called the bank. The joint savings account, which had held just over $90,000, money we'd been saving for a wedding that would now never happen, had been drained. Closed. 2 days ago. The day after my father died. Next, I called my lawyer, Ben. Ben wasn't just a lawyer. He was my best friend from college, a man who had spent Thanksgivings at my parents' table. His voice, usually full of easy humor, went dead serious when I told him what had happened. "She took the physical deed?" he asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Liam, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. It's a title held at the registry. She can't just take the paper and claim half." "She thinks I don't know that, Ben," I said, my voice eerily calm. "She thinks I'm a grieving mess who won't check, who will just roll over when her lawyer sends a threatening letter." "Okay," Ben said, and I could hear the click of his keyboard on the other end of the line. He was in work mode now. "Okay, this is what we do. First, you file a police report for the stolen deed. It's a document, it's theft. Then, you go to the registry first thing tomorrow and file a notice of dispute on the title. It freezes the property. No one can do anything with it without you being present. It's a red flag the size of a billboard." "Good," I said. "Do it." "Liam, are you okay?" he asked, his tone softening. "No,"
I answered honestly. But I will be. This isn't about emotion anymore, Ben. This is a hostile takeover, and I'm not losing my father's house. While Ben went to work, I did too. I logged into every financial account I had, changing passwords, adding security questions she wouldn't know the answers to. I called my financial advisor and put a lock on my investment portfolio and my retirement accounts. I moved the watch and the bonds to a safety deposit box under only my name. And then I started digging.
Chloe was smart, but she was impulsive. She was a graphic designer who lived for aesthetic, for the appearance of success, not the grinding work of building it. This plan, the timing, the theft, the cold efficiency, it didn't smell like her. It smelled like someone else, someone who knew about finance, about property, about applying pressure at the exact right moment. I thought about the last 6 months, the new friends she'd made in her fancy new gym, the client dinners that ran late, the way she'd started talking about a fresh start, maybe in Miami or LA, how Boston was stifling, how she gently, then not so gently, pushed me to add her name to the title of the house. It's what partners do, Liam. It's a sign of commitment. I'd refused, not out of mistrust, but because of the loan terms with my dad. It was complicated. She'd been furious. Now I knew why. I pulled out my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I logged into her iCloud account. She'd logged in on my computer once to print a boarding pass and had saved the password. I felt a twinge of guilt that was immediately vaporized by white-hot anger. Her photos were a gallery of a life I wasn't part of. Drinks at rooftop bars, weekends at a chic hotel in the Berkshires. There he was, in picture after picture, a guy with 2 white teeth, a sharp suit, and the smug, self-satisfied look of a predator. His arm was around her in every shot. His name was Mark. I found their messages. It wasn't just an affair. It was a strategy session. Mark, did you talk to him about the title? Chloe, not yet. His dad is really sick. It's a bad time. It's the perfect time. He's distracted. Push him. She's grieving, Mark. It feels awful. It's business, baby. This is for our future. That house is your golden ticket. We get that equity, we're set for a year in Costa Rica. I scrolled back, my stomach churning. The plans got more elaborate. They talked about the savings account. They talked about me. Mark called me the Mark. He called my father's illness a fortunate window of opportunity. I took screenshots. I saved everything. I emailed it all to Ben with the subject line, Evidence, Conspiracy. Ben called me within minutes. Liam, this is beyond divorce. This is fraud. This is conspiracy to commit theft. I know, I said, my voice quiet. He's the architect, she's the willing instrument. What do you want to do? Ben asked, his voice grave. I looked out the window at the darkening sky. The rain had stopped. The world was sharp and clear and cold. I want to wait, I said. I want to watch. They think they're smart. They think they're ahead. Let them get deeper. Let them make a mistake. This is dangerous, Ben warned. They're trying to refinance the house. I found the application. They forged your signature, Liam. It's not bad, but it's not great. Freeze it, I said. But don't tell them yet. Let them think it's going through. I want to see how far they're willing to go. I was no longer just a grieving son, a betrayed fiancé. I was a strategist. This was my board now, and they were about to learn that they weren't just playing with emotions. They were playing with a man who had nothing left to lose and a father who had taught him everything he knew about winning. The next week was a study in controlled silence. I ignored her texts, her increasingly frantic emails from a new address. Liam, we need to talk about the house. The bank is asking questions. My lawyer can't get through to Ben.
I said nothing. I let the pressure build on her end. Let her and her slick boyfriend sit in their fancy hotel room wondering why their perfect plan was hitting snags. I, meanwhile, was working with Ben and a private investigator he recommended. Mark, it turned out, was a piece of work. Real name, Marcus Reynolds.
a failed real estate speculator with a history of complaints for shady deals. He had a bankruptcy a few years back and was currently under investigation by the state's Financial Regulatory Board for running a Ponzi scheme. He was desperate for a big score. My house, my savings, were his intended lifeline. He'd done it before. The PI found 2 other women in the past 3 years, both financially comfortable, both emotionally vulnerable, whom Marcus had swept into whirlwind romances, convinced to empty their accounts for can't-lose investments, and then left high and dry. They were too embarrassed to press charges. He was a parasite, and Chloe was his latest host. I met Ben at his office, a sleek space with a view of the harbor. He laid it all out on his massive mahogany desk, the forged refinance documents, the bank records showing transfers from our savings into an account under Marcus's name, the evidence from the iCloud messages. "It's enough for the DA to get interested," Ben said. "Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. This is serious federal time, Liam." I stared at the documents, at the fake version of my signature. It was a good copy. She'd practiced. The betrayal was so intimate, so detailed. "What about Chloe?" I asked, my voice flat.
"Accessory to all of it," Ben said. "At best, she's a duped accomplice. At worst, she's a willing participant. A jury would have to decide." I thought of the girl I'd fallen in love with, the one who wanted to build a life. Had she always been this person? Or had this guy, Marcus, simply found the worst parts of her and given them a purpose? It didn't matter. Not anymore. "Okay," I said, looking up at Ben. "It's time." The plan was simple. We knew they were getting desperate. The refinance was frozen thanks to the dispute I had filed on the title. They couldn't access the money. Marcus would be getting anxious, pushing for another way. We just had to give them a little rope. Ben had a contact at the title company. He let it slip, discreetly, to the agent handling the frozen refinance that the title issue was almost cleared up and that the homeowner, me, was out of the country dealing with a family death and would be incommunicado for another week. It was the perfect window, and they took the bait. 2 days later, my security cameras, which Chloe had forgotten existed, showed a car with a real estate agency's logo on the door pulling up to my house. A man I recognized from the PI's photos as Marcus's preferred fixer, a shady realtor named David Ellis, got out. Chloe and Marcus greeted him at the door, all smiles. They led him inside for a tour. I watched it all live on my phone from Ben's office. My heart was a cold stone in my chest. "You getting this?" Ben asked, his own phone recording the feed. "Every second," I said. We watched as Marcus pointed out features of my house. He said, "Original molding," as if he'd installed it himself. We watched as David Ellis nodded, taking photos on his phone. "I've got a buyer lined up," Ellis said, his voice crisp through the audio feed. "Corporate client. Pays in cash, no inspections. They want a quick close. We list at 1.2. They'll offer $950. Clean. Simple." $950? Chloe said, a frown on her face. "But it's worth at least—" "It's a fire sale, sweetheart," Marcus interrupted, patting her arm. "Speed, not top dollar. Remember the plan. Costa Rica." "And the husband?" Ellis asked, barely looking up from his phone. "The title dispute?" Marcus waved a dismissive hand. "He's a mess, grieving his daddy. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll be on a beach drinking mojitos. He'll take a settlement to make it all go away. They always do." I looked at Ben. He was already on the phone with his contact at the district attorney's office. "We have them," I whispered, the words tasting like ash and justice. "We have them on everything." It happened an hour later. I watched it all from a rented sedan parked down the street, Ben in the driver's seat. 2 unmarked cars and a Boston police cruiser pulled up silently, blocking the driveway. Detectives and 2 uniformed officers got out. They didn't knock. They had a warrant. The door opened, I saw Marcus's confident smile falter, then collapse entirely. I saw Chloe's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. I saw the realtor, David Ellis, try to back away, only to be met by another officer. They were read their rights right there on my front porch, in the crisp afternoon sun. Marcus started blustering, his voice a high-pitched whine I couldn't hear but could easily imagine. "This is a misunderstanding! You can't do this!" Chloe just stood there, frozen, as cold steel cuffs were clicked around her wrists. She looked small. She looked lost.
She looked across the street then, her gaze scanning the parked cars. And for a single heart-stopping second, her eyes met mine through the windshield. There was no recognition at first, just a panicked animal scan of her surroundings. Then it clicked. She saw me, saw the calm, expressionless look on my face, saw that I was not in another country, that I was not a broken mess. I saw the exact moment she understood. Her face, already pale, went ashen. Her mouth formed a silent O of horror. She knew. She knew I had seen it all. She knew I had orchestrated this. I had not been the victim. I had been the architect of their downfall. I held her gaze for a 3 count. Then I gave her a single, slow, deliberate nod. It was the last thing she saw before the detective gently guided her head down and placed her in the back of the squad car. The aftermath was a whirlwind of lawyers, depositions, and plea deals. Marcus, facing a mountain of evidence and the prospect of a long sentence in a federal prison, folded almost immediately. He gave up everyone, including David Ellis, in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence. He was a coward at his core. Chloe initially tried to play the victim. She claimed Marcus had manipulated her, that she was scared, that she didn't know the full extent of his plans. But the iCloud messages were undeniable. They showed her active, willing participation, her cold calculation in the texts she sent me, her greed in the messages to him. The DA offered her a deal: full restitution of every penny she'd taken from the savings account, a signed sworn confession to the forgery and the theft of the deed, a permanent restraining order, and the complete relinquishment of any claim to my house, my assets, anything of mine. In exchange, I would not press additional charges. She would avoid prison, but she would have a felony record for fraud. She took it.
The divorce proceedings, we'd been common law, but it was messy, were finalized in a bleak, windowless conference room. She looked hollowed out. The light, the vibrancy I'd once loved was completely gone. She signed the papers without looking at me. I did the same. As she was gathering her things to leave, she finally spoke, her voice a ragged whisper. "I never meant for it to go this far, Liam." I looked at her then. Really looked at her for the first time since the funeral. I felt nothing. No hatred, no love. Just a vast, empty space where she used to be. "I know," I said quietly. "But you meant for it to start, and that was enough." I walked out of that room and into the sunlight. It was over. They say living well is the best revenge. I don't know if that's entirely true. Sometimes revenge is a perfectly executed plan that protects what's yours and ensures that those who tried to destroy you face the consequences of their actions. But the living well part, that comes after. I sold the brownstone a year later. The memories in those walls weren't just of her. They were of my father, of a life that was supposed to be. I couldn't separate the good from the toxic, so I let it go. I used the money to buy a small, modern place on the coast of Maine. It has huge windows that look out over the endless, churning Atlantic. It's quiet. It's mine. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe moved back to her hometown in Ohio. She works at a print shop. Marcus is serving a 7-year sentence. David Ellis lost his real estate license. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that woman in the conference room, hollowed out by her own choices. I don't hate her. In a strange way, I pity her. She was so desperate for a different life, for excitement, that she let a monster convince her to burn down her own. My father's death didn't create her betrayal. It just revealed the character that was always there. The hardest lesson wasn't about trust. It was about comprehension, understanding that the people closest to you are capable of unimaginable things, that love isn't a shield, it's just a feeling, and it can be overruled by greed, by weakness, by a fundamental lack of character. But I also learned about my own. I learned that the lessons my father taught me, about patience, about strategy, about quiet strength, were my real inheritance. They were the things she couldn't steal, couldn't forge, couldn't ever take from me. I survived her. I rebuilt. And in the quiet solitude of my own home by the sea, I finally found a peace that no one can ever threaten again. What's the wildest, most shocking betrayal you've ever witnessed or heard about? Do you think quiet revenge is better than loud confrontation? Let me know your stories and thoughts in the comments below. And if you felt that justice was served here today, share this story with someone who needs to see that sometimes the good guy does win. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories about resilience, justice, and the twists of fate that change everything. Thanks for watching.